world looks to the Paris Olympics, the spotlight turns to the transformative role of international sports events in shaping cities and nations. For 26 years across continents, Laszlo Vajda has been a key architect in the successful bidding and organization of multiple Olympic Games. Today, he joins us on High Talk to share insights into the enduring influence of sports and the legacy of the Olympic Games. Thank you so much for joining us, Professor. Well, having participated in so many Olympic Games, what is your most memorable Olympic-related experience?
Yes, probably I would come from the angle of bidding versus organizing. Yeah. When we were bidding, and I had 5 bid experiences with different cities in different continents, both summer and winter games, the bidding is very political. It needs a lot of diplomacy, a lot of negotiations and lobbying, whereas the organization is more a logistical challenge. But the bidding is much more about positioning and selling the proposition.
Well, you've involved in organizing the Beijing 2008 Summer Games and the Beijing 2022 Winter Games. What differences do you experience between the two?
I still vividly remember when I moved to China in 2005, working for the 2008 Games, and then continued my life here in China until the conclusion of the 2022 Games. The difference between the two games, obviously, is that China has developed a lot since the beginning of the 2000s. So to me, the 2008 Games was more like China coming out to the world and showed itself as an international host, an international player, not just in sport, but also in politics, in economy, in social affairs. And I was very happy to be part of that journey that China took from 2001 to 2008 as it prepared and organized the games back then. 2022 was very different. China was already a world player in every sense. Of course, China has been a big player in sport, one of the strongest in the world. And I was actually quite surprised myself that in the Winter Games, China was doing remarkably. Summer sports had always been very strong in China, but the winter was a big question mark, even for us, when the decision was taken that we would bid for the 2022 Winter Games. So I was very happy to see that the Chinese athletes also showed themselves in winter sport, not just on ice, which was a tradition in China, but also on snow.
Well, during your experiences of bidding for the Olympic Games, what would you say the biggest legacies of each game to a country and its people?
For example, the national pride. Sometimes we don't consider the nation-building aspect of a large event. I would agree with some scholars who made some analysis of the Vancouver Games in Canada 2010 or the London Games in 2012, how these two games brought together the Canadian society and the society in the UK. Both countries were somehow losing their ways internationally, losing their weight. And the Olympic Games back then brought the nation together like nothing before. Let's go back to 2008 for China. How the games changed people's views on the world. How Chinese people, average people, look at foreigners. How Chinese people became, sometimes I read it all around the city, became more open, more welcoming. After 2008, I could see how this changed remarkably. Another remarkable legacy would be the social aspect. I'm going back to 2008 again. A lot of people were worried about the volunteers in 2008. A lot of foreigners thought, it will be organized in China. They will just get out some university students as a compulsory way. Instead, we had a lot of, I would call them social volunteers, people from all walks of life. And one thing that I'm very, very proud is that the volunteer associations still exist since 2008. And those associations or groups, sometimes very informal, still offer volunteer work for all sorts of things. So these social aspects to me are remarkable legacies of the games, other than, as we said, the economy, the infrastructure and others.
Well, we have seen the inclusion of new sports such as skateboarding and breaking at this year's Olympics. What do the recognition and inclusion of new sports signify?
There is a new tendency in consuming sport by young people. I would say that a lot of young audiences do not necessarily appreciate or follow older or more traditional sports. Why that is, there may be different reasons. Maybe the excitement, maybe just the way it is conducted. But it seems that young generation, when I say young, I would say between 15 and 30, that generation is more interested in hip things, you know, TikTok and YouTube-based stuff, Instagram stuff that is more engaging, quicker, faster, in many ways sort of louder. So in that sense, the International Olympic Committee tried to respond by offering some of these new sports. Most of them are urban, actually, which again is the concept of bringing sport to the people rather than asking the people come to the sport. So I think in this concept, Paris was also participating, took up this idea and presented a few new sports.
Well, you talk about the emerging sports, and you are the Secretary General of the International Teqball Federation, dedicated to promoting the development of Teqball and seeking recognition from the International Olympic Committee. So can you explain to our viewers what is Teqball and why do you feel it deserves international recognition?
Okay, so Teqball is an invention. It was invented by two friends in a basement in Budapest about 12 years ago. They started playing on a ping pong table, very familiar for Chinese audiences, of course. But then the bouncing of the ball was not proper, so they curved the table. And this is where the idea came. It's basically a curved table tennis table on which we play football. There are different rules. I wouldn't go into the rules now. It's a fun game. You can play anywhere, indoor, outdoors. You can play on the beach, in sand, on hard court. So it's a very flexible sport. Playing is easy and fun. Playing well is difficult, just like in ping pong. Teqball has a very similar nature. Today, we have an international federation, as you said. I'm the Secretary General. This was formed 6 years ago, so we are a very young federation, but we have 155 national federations globally on every continent. So we have grown very rapidly. And this is because we are very strong in an urban environment and young people seem to like our sport. We are very keen to improve. We have World Championships every year. We have major events on all continents in the world. So we are very proud of how we developed in the last 6 years as a federation. And also, you know, it's a very inclusive sport. Boys and girls, men and women can play. We have equal opportunities for both genders, which is one of the cornerstones of today's way of thinking about sports.
Thank you so much for joining us, Professor. It was a great honor for me.
Thank you very much for having me.